Stuck in the middle, thousands of migrants are trying to cross from Belarus into Poland. European leaders accuse Minsk of using them as political leverage. Belarus says EU countries are behaving inhumanely. Who will win the tug of war and at what price? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zeidan. The path behind them is blocked by Belarus, and Poland says they can't come in. Thousands of refugees are trapped between those countries as they try to make their journey further into Europe. Poland accuses Belarus of using the refugees as political pawns. Belarusian officials deny those allegations. They blame Poland for the refugees' dire situation. Well, the row is threatening to create another migrant crisis on the continent. The European Union is now threatening even more sanctions against the Belarusian government. Sonia Gallego reports.
Trapped between the woods and a highway in Belarus, these people have been walking towards the Polish border, anxious to enter the European Union. On the other side, Polish security forces in riot gear, part of the 12,000 that have been stationed there guarding the frontier, preventing hundreds of refugees and migrants from breaching the border. But it is a deadlock that risks igniting into another migration crisis on the doorstep of the EU. For months, thousands have been entering the bloc through Belarus, at first via Lithuania and Latvia, now mainly through Poland. The EU has accused Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko of orchestrating wave upon wave of undocumented migrants and asylum seekers, in retaliation, they say, for sanctions it imposed on his government over its violent crackdowns on the opposition. Caught in the middle of this brinkmanship, those attempting to escape the harsh conditions they find themselves in, with no shelter, and being steered towards Poland by Belarusian state border officials. Some had taken the chance after hearing that Belarusian travel agents were selling visa invitations to the EU, only to find themselves surviving for weeks in the forests that border Poland and Belarus.
They give us the cutters. They provide everything. But when you said to them, okay, I want to go to Minsk, I want to go back to my country. It's so dangerous. They said no, you should go to Poland. Belarus, they put the gun to our heads when we said we need to go to Minsk.
So far, Poland's nationalist government has refused help from the EU's frontier agency, despite reports by Polish border guards of hostile behavior and threats from Belarusian forces. And for those stuck in this no man's land, there is no guarantee how long they will have to face the elements, with little access to food and water, human pawns between two hostile neighbours. Sonia Gallego, Al Jazeera.
Well, most migrants trying to cross from Belarus into Europe come from the Middle East and Africa. They've mainly attempted to pass through Poland, Latvia and Lithuania to reach the rest of the continent. The migrants are reportedly being helped by Belarusian authorities to get to the border with the EU after flying into Minsk. Poland beefed up its security and is accused of violating the international right to asylum by pushing migrants back into Belarus. Rights groups have criticized Poland and Belarus for their treatment of the migrants who are dealing with cold temperatures, a lack of food and medical help. Let's bring in our guests into the show now. We have joining us from Warsaw, Liliana Śmiech. She's the Director of Analysis at the Warsaw Institute. In Moscow, Viktor Olevich is lead expert at the Center for Actual Politics. And in Brussels, Pieter Cleppe is editor of Brussels Report.EU. Welcome to you all. Let's start with Liliana. So what is the perspective from Warsaw? Do they see that Belarus is deliberately using these migrants to put political pressure on countries like Poland?
First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation to the program, and directly answering your question, yes, Belarus is using those people to destabilize the situation in the European Union. But first of all, Poland as a country has always been supporting free Belarus. For us, the Belarusian society is our friend, and it will be our friend.
Let me jump in there, though, if I may, Liliana, and present to you the perspective from Belarus. They say countries like Poland have actually created this crisis because they're not observing humane treatment and reception of potential refugees and migrants who just want a safe place in Europe.
Of course, but there are legal ways to enter the European Union. They can contact the employers here, they can try to get the visa. But what Poland is doing, we are trying to help those people, but it is not possible in this case because this is the element of the hybrid war. And this is the Belarus, this is the regime of Lukashenko who is using those people to try to destabilize the situation here.
Let me take that perspective to Moscow. Viktor, what do you make of the suggestions that really Belarusian authorities have created this crisis as some kind of political payback because of the dispute between the EU, countries like Poland, and Belarus?
Well, we have to look back a little more than a year to see where the roots of this crisis lie. Minsk, Lukashenko, the head of Belarus, believes that Poland and Lithuania played a lead role in a campaign to delegitimize him, including on the European continent within the EU, after the elections last year that were falsified in his favor. And so he sees this as payback. And the object of this action, continuing action with migrants from the Middle East passing through Belarusian territory into the EU, the object of this is to show
let me jump in if I could, Viktor, as well. Forgive me for interrupting you.
Authorities.
But also, the report suggests that these are not simply people who are passing through, but the claims, at least from countries like Poland and Lithuania, is that the Belarusian authorities have been actively organizing, facilitating, helping these people to come to Minsk and then bust them to the border. This is not a case, they say, of Belarusian authorities simply caught in the middle.
Of course, this involves essentially sponsoring the movement of these migrants from the Middle East, from Iraq, for example, through Belarusian territory, and then providing routes for them to enter EU countries, Lithuania and Poland. Of course, if the Belarusian authorities did not want this to happen, it would simply not happen. There is no question about it. And so the reason behind it is that the Belarusian authorities want to show the duplicity, the supposed duplicity of the Polish and Lithuanian authorities, since Warsaw and Vilnius spoke a lot about human rights violations in Belarus last year and this year. So Belarus wants to create this, is creating these incidents to show that Poland and Lithuania themselves are violating the rights of these migrants that want to come through Belarus into Polish and Lithuanian territory. And so Belarus is actively using what is happening at the border and what is happening in the temporary migrant camps for its information campaign, both domestically and a campaign that it's waging as far as foreign countries are concerned.
Right.
But if Belarus ever had any hopes of this leading to a modification or a softening of economic or political sanctions against Minsk, this would simply not work.
All right,
If
let me jump in
the
again,
European
Victor.
Union is
We
going
do
use
want
this
to talk more
harden
about
sanctions against Minsk.
what the impact will be in the end. But before we get to that point, I want to bring Pieter into this discussion. Pieter, are we really looking at a situation in the 21st century of basically human beings, many of them women and children, perhaps even refugees, being used as political pawns, as payback because of a political dispute between countries that they have nothing to do with?
Well, I'm afraid that's indeed the case. And if there were any doubts that the Belarusian regime was involved, I think yesterday you could see the images of, I think, a few thousand people being escorted to the border. So I mean, it's sort of, I think, hard to deny for Belarus now that it is indeed instrumentalizing migration. And surely these people have been lured to Belarus with all kinds of false promises. Now, the question is what to do about this now. I think on the short term, what the European Union can do is to tell the airlines that are bringing these people from the Middle East to Minsk that they are no longer allowed to operate in the EU as long as they fly on Minsk. I mean, of course, only for a short period, but that would definitely end this little scheme that is, I think, no longer just hybrid warfare. It is actually bordering on warfare when you see the images, and it looks indeed like the Belarusian regime is deliberately looking and craving for some violence. So let's hope everybody keeps its cool, because that's of
Pieter,
course very important.
To a certain extent, has the issue once again shown a crisis on Europe's borders that the EU is struggling to deal with? It's struggling to come up with a coherent policy that can, at the one hand, satisfy those concerns about national sovereignty and borders, but also balance that with respect for international obligations towards receiving people who show up at the border and say, hey, we need protection, we have kids, we have women.
Well, of course, legally, it's doubtful whether these people can claim to come from a non-safe country, given that they voluntarily went to Belarus. I mean, the same issues were at play when you had the issue between Turkey and Greece. Now, the thing is, fundamentally, the European Union does not properly control its borders. The reason is that if you, as an irregular migrant, if you manage to enter EU territory, even if you are denied asylum, there's a very low chance that you will be sent back, and I think that's the core issue here. And this is now being abused by autocrats at Europe's borders. And there are several ways of trying to deal with that. One of it is what Denmark and the United Kingdom are now trying to do, which is to sort of outsource asylum processing. It's very hard, but I think if this would be taken up at the EU level, then the idea to sort of allow people to apply for asylum in the region, and then when they get a yes, they can come to Europe. If not, they are repatriated from Europe to that reception center. I mean, that kind of a system could indeed settle the situation, but
you've opened up an important point there about taking it up. Your words were taking it up at the EU level. I'm going to come back to you in a moment about that, but before we go that far, I want to bring in Liliana and ask this question. Who's winning the game so far, Liliana?
Well, I would say that right now the situation is quite stable. Poland has discussed the issue with Latvia and Lithuania authorities, so we somehow are able to manage it on our own, but we're not saying no. Maybe in the future we will need more help from European Union and also from NATO. But so far, I think all the countries should understand the situation that Poland is not the aim of those migrants. These are Germany, France, Belgium. So what Poland is doing, we are protecting the borders of the European Union. We are protecting it. So I think that should be stressed out, and also why Lukashenko is doing it. We should also remember about the fact that European Union did not approve the presidential election that were won by him on 9th August last year. So right now, European Union leaders are meeting with Liliana, right? So Lukashenko really is not handling the situation in a good manner. So he's just sending those poor people to the
all right, but will he prevail? Will his policies produce any softening of the EU line, a rollback of the sanctions which were imposed in June and so on?
I think that there's still lacking of a common voice in the European Union. But you know, personally, I don't see here any area to discussion, because we should not discuss anything with terrorists. So in this case, I don't see any area to discuss it in a normal way as we do in, for example, European Union.
Let me bring in Viktor, because you had something to comment on, didn't you, about that? Your analysis, Viktor, is that basically this will backfire on Minsk?
Well, it actually makes Belarus a singular loser in this situation, because first of all, there is little chance, to put it mildly, that the European Union is going to soften the sanctions regime that it introduced against Belarus following last year's falsified elections. And so if Minsk had any doubts about that the last few months as this migrant crisis has proceeded, these doubts have evaporated. In fact, if anything, the European Union or specific European Union countries are likely to introduce even harsher sanctions against Minsk. At the same time, and so the question arises, is the economic and political damage worth the information campaign that Belarus is waging, the propaganda campaign? That's a question for the Belarusian authorities to answer. But there is another interesting winner in this situation, and that's in a way Russia. Because as the economic fortunes of Belarus decline because of Minsk's position towards this crisis, including this crisis, so does Russian influence, including economic influence, in Belarus increase. Because Belarus has to get the resources that it was getting from the EU through its economic relations with EU countries. It has to somehow get those resources from somewhere else, and basically Lukashenko at this point can ask for those resources in Russia and to some degree in China, with which Belarus has fairly good, pretty good relations.
Okay.
And of course, Belarus's main sponsor in the last few years has been Russia. So essentially, this crisis is weakening, is continuing to weaken Lukashenko, even though perhaps he believed in the beginning that it would strengthen him.
Okay, so a weakening of Lukashenko, perhaps, Pieter, also? Is there a weakening of EU influence, as Viktor pointed out there, perhaps Russian influence increases? You said an important sentence a moment ago about whether there would be any action on the EU level to take this matter up. Listening to the latest statements out of the EU Commission, it seems clear when they say, you know, this is up to the national competence to deal with. It doesn't sound like there's a lot of political will at the EU level to get involved with this, at least at the level of trying to sort out how you handle people at the borders, right?
Well, I'm not so sure, to be honest. Of course, when it comes to border protection, that is a national competence, and it should stay in national competence. I don't think we need like a big bureaucracy or Frontex even. I don't think they can do much good, frankly. But what the European Union can do is to for example, tackle this trade aspect of this particular crisis, the fact that all the airlines are transporting people from the Middle East to Europe. And you see a hardening of the stance. Austria was traditionally one of the more, let's say, dovish member states towards Belarus, and they have now hardened their stance. I think we have to really make a distinction between sanctions that are intended to punish autocrats for domestic abuse. Typically, those sanctions are not very successful, and other kinds of measures that are needed to sort of protect the integrity of the European Union's borders. And we're talking about the second set of measures now. And I think if this continues, all EU member states will no doubt that they will need to take action, that they will basically put an end to this chaos. So indeed, I don't think Lukashenko will emerge as the winner here. Of course, it's possible that domestically this may strengthen his position. Unfortunately, that's what dictators do. They stir up some trouble abroad in order to sort of have the rally around the flag effect. But then looking at the massive protests that we've seen in Belarus, I would doubt
Pieter,
how strong
couldn't one
his
make that
position really
same
is.
allegation for some of the EU countries who are dealing with this issue too, that they have right-wing governments that see a political interest for them in rallying their public opinion around a sort of anti-migrant and refugee stance, right?
Well, of course, the Polish government will also use this to increase its popularity. But I mean, it's not the Polish government that is flying in people from the Middle East to then force them to the border. This is all a consequence of actions taken by the regime in Minsk.
All right, let me bring in Liliana again and ask this question. Is it really a win for countries like Poland if Lukashenko is weakened, but at the expense or at the benefit of countries like Russia? Is that much comfort in Warsaw?
Well, yeah, but what we I just like to comment very shortly on the previous thing that the information from Brussels has said that. Well, I think that this issue should be completely unpolitical, you know, because we should not say that, well, right-wing government is doing something and the opposition is doing the other thing, you know. We are protecting our borders, and that should be really point number one in the political agenda.
But Liliana, let me jump in and tell you what a lot of human rights groups are saying. You know, a couple of thousand, mostly women and children, aren't exactly a huge security threat to the continent of Europe, are they?
Yes, well...
I mean, they could be a more humane way to deal with this, even if, you know, Warsaw doesn't want to have to deal with people being shipped in, especially to be used as political pawns.
But we are dealing with those people. We want to help them, but this is the responsibility also of the parents who are taking those children for like a huge trip, which also costs a lot of money. You know, not every person in the Middle East, not every person in Iraq is able to pay such a huge amount of money. So this is also the thing that should be stressed out here. And of course, such usage of people as a weapon in in such a conflict, in such a hybrid war, I think it's the first one in modern history. So yeah, I completely agree that it shouldn't be like this, but we as a country, we need to protect our borders.
All right, we're going to have
to. And we are not protecting only our borders, but we are protecting borders of the whole European Union. Of course, our situation.
All right, you've made that point. All right, you've made that point loud and clear. I'm afraid we are out of time, so we're going to have to end it there. Let's thank our guests very much, Liliana, Viktor, and Pieter. And thank you too for watching. You can see the show again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, head over to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Sami Zeidan, and the whole team here, for now, it's goodbye.